Hi there, my name is Claudio, and welcome back to Femboy D&D, Episode 2. Glad to have you here to learn about the best hobby ever. Rather than wasting time on myself today, we might as well jump into our topic for today. How to be a Noob 101. We'll cover everything from finding your first group to how to interact with the community. If you're interested in D&D, finding your first group can be a very intimidating task. But do not worry, my newborn dorks. There's a very easy way to find people to play D&D with. Of course, the easiest, and likely most fun, is to talk to your friends. If you are part of a friend group that's made up of many mutual friends, then gathering together 4 or 5 to hang out one day, hopefully digitally, we are in a pandemic, should be easy enough. Now, it wouldn't be advisable to just throw the idea at anybody who will listen. D&D does carry quite the cultural stigma with it, after all. Instead, maybe consider asking friends who may already have a vested interest in fantasy or gaming. If you have friends that already play D&D, even better. Now that you've talked to your dorky friends and the idea is approved of, it is time to decide who will be DM and just try to have a good time. If you are all newbies, then it is unlikely that it will be very intricate or rules-oriented, and that's okay. Growing with your friends while you play D&D and honing your skills is very easy. It is also nice because friends are more likely to share dice and books to help everybody learn. Don't have friends? Alright, so you're a normal D&D player. Let's try to find how you can still have a D&D game in less than an hour. If you are listening to this podcast, it likely means 2 things. You have internet access, and you speak/understand English to some degree. These 2 aspects combined make it very, very easy to find D&D games with strangers. The easiest way to find a D&D game is by looking online. There are plenty of online message boards and forums where people just like you are desperately bored and trying to find ways that they can play the game we all know and love. Online Discord communities and subreddits can be a very quick method of finding a handful of strangers to play D&D with. Although this has a few very prominent drawbacks. For one, many of these players are seasoned veterans that don't necessarily have time to stop and teach a new player how to understand dice formulas or whatever. That's because at the end of the day, most online players are strangers, making this method often very impersonal. This can also be viewed as a positive, as there are no emotional ties to leaving a group or kicking toxic players out. If you have the time, many online games even have applications to better filter through players and find exactly who you are looking for. So while this method can be very convenient and fast, gambling on whether or not a player will go out of their way to ruin a session isn't a risk many newbies would take. So you are still new, and you don't have friends, and you want a place that makes it very comfortable to learn. Adventurers League might be a good alternative solution to the other 2 options. On the surface, an in-person gathering at somewhere large like a restaurant or gaming store with predetermined DMs and campaigns make it very easy to learn. I dare say this may be the worst option, though. Adventurers League has other complex rules that make the overall playing experience drastically different from a standard home game. Additionally, with most stories and characters predetermined, it creates an environment that has much more mechanical focus, giving little reward for creativity or roleplay. Plus, large social events can be quite overwhelming since this is another situation where veterans like to get together to play. For now, if you are new, the best option is to ask your personal friends if they happen to play D&D. If they do, then getting into the gaming community should be super easy. If not, then there should be no issue with treating D&D like any other game night with friends. D&D can be a very passionate hobby, and it is a social game at the end of the day. If you don't care about the people you play with or don't want to be social with them, how are you supposed to fall in love with it? Alright, so you have a group together, and you, as the woefully unprepared gamer that you are, need to figure out how to prep yourself for your very first D&D game. Well, here's a few notes to keep in mind for preparing yourself. It's all about the money, honey. Well, maybe not. D&D, for those who are very invested in it, can be an expensive endeavor. New 5e books come out on a regular basis with varying price tags and purposes. The dice goblins among you may find it more entertaining to go buy massive amounts of math rocks. If you are starting an in-person group, it is highly advised to have at least one player's handbook and monster manual. Wizards of the Coast, the D&D company, advises to also have a Dungeon Master's Guide, but I believe this is largely overrated. You should also have at least one set of RPG dice with the group. You can additionally purchase maps, minifigures, props, additional content books, and so much more, but this isn't really needed to have a good experience. The total cost by now is looking pretty high, but don't worry. Like I said earlier, you most likely have internet access, which means that D&D can be completely free. Sites like Roll20, World Anvil, D&D Beyond, and Reroll mean that as long as you have an email, you can play D&D for free. All these resources have nearly identical information to the paid books, and have plenty of tools to make character creation, organization, and even dice rolling much easier. They can hold your hand throughout the entire process and even automate things such as passive character abilities, maps, and stats. Even as somebody who has been playing for over 10 years, I still lean on these websites and applications for quick rule references or character organization. So if you are new to D&D, and especially if you are on a budget, maybe consider ditching pen and paper in exchange for a laptop and RNG programs. So when you are first getting into D&D, making your first character can be an intimidating process. While I do want to make this to a whole episode further down the line, for now I will briefly go over your first character, since it is central to being new to the hobby. Characters and playstyles can be very complicated at times, and even reward deep and complex characters. When making your first character, the best advice I can give is to throw that out the window. People often joke about the level 1 human fighter with a sword and shield, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some game classes like fighters, monks, and rogues have minimal micromanagement of resources like spells or limited abilities. Most of the time, these basic races or classes can also be made more complex down the line with multiclassing or subclasses to help you explore the rules of the game as you learn more. That also makes races like halflings, elves, dwarves, and humans very easy to play and understand. Unsurprisingly, those races and classes also conveniently closely align with pop culture fantasy parties such as the Fellowship of the Ring, for easy of inspiration. Speaking of inspiration, oh goodness, look at that segue. Character concepts can come from nearly anywhere as a new player, and most would not fault you for more or less playing Legolas or Frodo, so long as you put your own unique spin on it. If you do want to make a completely unique character and are struggling with the design aspect, look to the last main character attribute that most do not look at: background. Backgrounds are a character's 9-to-5 job outside of adventuring and provide many sample personalities and backstories in the books. So simply try to figure out what job you would want, and the books can hold your hand the rest of the way. Remember that so long as your character is not designed with some aspect of them impacting your party's fun, then they are completely free to design as you please. Also, don't feel required to play exactly to the setting, if you feel it better represents the character to be slightly inaccurate. This actually caused controversy a few times before in the D&D community, and I wouldn't stress my stance. You do you, boo. Play what you want, and if your DM won't allow a character who needs a wheelchair, they are a bad DM. If your DM refuses to allow LGBT characters, or era-specific non-conforming characters, they are a bad DM. Just have fun making your character, and get creative. You should stay mechanically simple, though. Let the roleplay do the magic for you. So you're at the table now with your extra books and dice and an empty bank account. You have your character sheet ready, and you are with your pals. What now? Well, if you are new to everybody there, introduce yourself politely. This may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how awkward some people can be and completely forget to say their own name. Briefly talk about any past experience you may have with the game, your pronouns, and then get into the nitty-gritty character. As a forever DM, I could say that it is always better to introduce yourself in character. It seriously helps with the immersion to say something such as, "Greetings, I am Renelix de Cannith, right hand to Baron Merrick's and diplomatic representative of Sean, at your service," rather than, my guy's named Renelix, and he's an artificer. So yeah. A good introduction can help people feel a lot closer to you and get a better understanding of the kind of character you are playing. While I wouldn't suggest going overboard with the dramatics, putting some flair to how to introduce yourself is great. Also remember to listen carefully to other people's character introduction, as understanding how you can interact with your team can make the whole experience much more fun for everybody involved. So you've started playing. Hopefully your DM is doing a great job. It is very immersive and the characters are fun. If your DM is good, then there's a good chance they know the rules pretty well. But oh no, there's a problem. You look down at your character sheet and to find the ability you need, and you see something that completely boggles you. For the sake of this scenario, let's say it is proficiency with a longsword. You have no idea what it means. Of course, you probably know what the words literally mean, but what does it mean in game? Fear not. For now, I will teach you how to properly ask questions and get the most information without breaking the flow of the game. If it's as simple as a roll, then phrasing the question just as clearly and simply would make the whole process very smooth. You could ask something like, how would my longsword proficiency affect this roll? The DM should be able to very quickly point something out on your sheet and give you a recommendation as to how your question would affect the situation in-game. A DM would have to be a real jerk not to answer a basic rule clarification. But let's say the situation is a bit more complicated, or you still aren't understanding. An easy follow-up to almost any question would be to ask, could you clarify what you mean by blank? Still involves very little flow breaking and is inoffensive. Beyond that, I would recommend bringing up the question after the session or privately with the DM. After that, the blame of misunderstanding could be put on your shoulders and create conflict among the players, so know the boundaries. Additionally, there are a few types of questions that are highly inadvisable. Asking plot-based or campaign questions out of character can corner the DM or put the table into a very uncomfortable situation that has no real good answer. The worst misunderstanding you could have is an accusatory misunderstanding. You will not totally know the other characters at your table most of the time. You will not know your DM's motivation for why they make NPCs act a certain way. So above all else, avoid asking the question, why would you do that? This is very quickly how fights start at a table, which could ruin a session. So please be considerate of the other people at the table. If you happen to be on the receiving end of this toxicity, do not be afraid to talk to your DM about it. Also, always remember that bad people can still be bad people, even in D&D. If people are making you uncomfortable, harass or bully you, then leave. I know how tempting it could be to glue yourself to people or a D&D group, and it is hard to leave. But you are more important. Take care of yourself. Now just have fun with your initiative fighting and roleplay and social gaming. Congratulations, you've completed your first ever session. You found your group and made a character, even ran into some problems along the way. But at the end of the day, you played D&D. Now all that is left to do is figure out if you want to continue to play. It is totally okay to dip your toes in and decide that maybe D&D or that group just isn't for you. And if you don't like it, then you should at least give it a try. If it was a good experience, then great. Talk to your group about what Session 2 is and how often you want to play. And don't forget to mention that your character is the coolest and most awesomest one there and everybody else sucks. Thanks for playing. Thank you for listening today. I hope you learned a lot and are ready to play your first game of D&D. If you want to stay updated on when new episodes come out or what's going on with your lovely Femboy host, go follow me over at Femboy_DND on Twitter. A massive thank you, as always, to my team helping me make this show a reality. Thank you Giggles for writing, Sam for doing this lovely art for the show, and Crispy for editing. I love you all, and their links will be found in the description. I hope you all have a wonderful first D&D session, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.